What's up, y'all? I have a very ambiguous question to ask. What is considered real art? Is it a sculpture, a painting, a digital image, a ceramic pot? Does it matter who makes it?
I think there's an artist in all of us, but it's sitting with yourself and allowing yourself to feel what you're supposed to feel without judgment.
My guest today is the artist, Sarah Bahbah. Now, you may have seen her dreamy photographs on Instagram or Tumblr over the years. She's a visual artist, writer, director, storyteller, a true multi-hyphenate. And today we're going to talk all about how identity and art can intertwine and reveal our true, authentic selves. My name is Christopher Rivas, and this is Brown Enough, stories between black and white. Let's start the show. Before meeting Sarah in person, I'd seen her pictures scrolling down on Instagram. I was struck by them. I knew she was building a world because each image told a story. When did you know that you wanted to be an artist?
I think I was born into it. I think a lot of my childhood was centered around creating these playgrounds in my head, which I can imagine a reality away from my mundane life in Australia. And yeah, I think I was always creating spaces I could just exist in and reimagine my world.
Spaces I could exist in and reimagine my world. Beautiful. What's a piece of art that stood out to you?
I actually studied art in high school and I really fell in love with Impressionism and Surrealism.
Wow.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be an artist?
That's a good question. What does it mean to be an artist? Having the ability to access your emotions and express yourself through a medium that you are passionate about.
Beautiful. I take being an artist as a high responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, we've interviewed a lot of people on here, but not everyone identifies as I am an artist, which is this sort of vague, not vague, but it can be a lot of things. And I think in today's society, it's crucial that we nourish artists and give artists opportunities and voices because, you know, when a coup comes in and a dictator comes by, artists are the first things to go.
Yeah, that's true.
Because artists have this immense power. So I thank you for being an artist. Sarah was raised by immigrant parents who were culturally conservative. She grew up in Australia, a world away from the culture her parents knew. Despite her challenges growing up, she now lives in sunny Los Angeles and is finally beginning to own who she is.
So I grew up in Perth. It's a small town in Western Australia, and I grew up in a very conservative Christian Middle Eastern household. And, you know, being a child of Palestinian, Jordanian parents, my parents immigrated with the mentality that they were bringing every part of their culture to Perth and to the house that I grew up in. And then they put us in private schools, which were very white-centric. Most of my peers were white. There was maybe a few brown people and maybe one black person.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it was very hard for me to fit into these spaces because at home, you know, I was being taught to be this submissive and obedient, you know, Christian, good Arab girl. And then at school with my white peers, I was being told to be this free, rebellious, sex-orientated woman. And so I didn't really feel like I had this space where I could fit in. And it wasn't until I moved to America that I realized just how whitewashed I was and just how much I was sacrificing so much of my identity to fit into these white spaces. And it started with blue contacts and straightening my hair and avoiding the sun and, not eating, like starving myself so my Arab curves wouldn't kick in. And then that kind of manifested into like, my conditioning and like the people I surrounded myself with. And I think I was just very lost for a really long time until I came here and I realized like there's more to the world than whiteness.
Amen.
Yeah.
There's far more to the world than whiteness.
Oh, yeah.
It's why I say bodies of culture and not bodies of color. Because whiteness doesn't try and take our color. What it wants is our culture. And often what it wants to do is take our culture for currency, right? Like, what can I take from culture that will allow me to appropriate it and make it my own? What's the tipping point that says like, oh, I'm going to reclaim my brownness?
The tipping point for me was, there were so many moments, but I guess when I moved to LA, my first year here was really difficult. I was like a shell of a human. I didn't really recognize myself anymore. I was really struggling with like anxiety and depression, and I had bulimia at the time, and like I just was so fixated on being someone other than who I was. And it took a huge awakening of like realizing if I kept going the way I was, I probably wouldn't survive. And so I started therapy and I started going to the gym and I just started implementing really healthy habits, which allowed me to work through a lot of my like repressed trauma around my identity, which allowed me to eventually get to a place of like completely owning who I am and the people I come from. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
Part of this work about owning herself was unpacking misconceptions about her faith. Because, let's be honest, there are a lot of misconceptions surrounding Middle Eastern people and what faith they might subscribe to. For Sarah, battling these misjudgments while trying to assert her own version of faith was complicated.
The biggest misconception is all Arabs are from Islam, and we're not. Actually, a lot of us are Christians, a lot of us are Jewish, a lot of us are Muslim, right? And people always just assume, like, you're automatically Muslim because the dominant part of the Middle East is, they all come from Islam. And so I think, like, for me, the biggest conflicts I've had is it's not really a conflict. It's more just like I have to always correct people. I'm like, oh, just because I'm Arab, it doesn't mean I'm Muslim. I'm Christian, And because my parents came from Jordan and Palestine, which are very Muslim-dominated cities. A lot of the restrictions within Islam were brought on to our overall cultural upbringing, and so a lot of the fight for freedom for me as a very like liberated young individual was breaking through like this mold that we had to be a certain way, like a good religious girl. It doesn't really matter what the religion is in order to be accepted by like our parents and our community. And so it was just breaking free from all the restrictions that come from Christianity and Islam in my household. Yeah.
How do your parents see your work now?
Well, I unfortunately have them blocked so they don't see much. It's just healthier, I want to say, because they are so set in their ways, and I've definitely come to accept the fact that they will never accept my work, but especially my mother. She's so strict. And every time we're on the phone, she's always asking me, like, are you praying? Are you going to church? Like, are you behaving? That's the one I get the most. She thinks I'm a virgin. Like, there's just, it's wild out there. I love her so much. She has the purest heart. And, her faith is truly, truly, like, so strong. And I look up to her, how she could be so dedicated to God and her Bible. But obviously, like, when I'm not in a place where I can like abide by her rules and like the Christian way, because I don't identify as Christian. I don't identify as anything. I just believe in like God. And so it's hard for her to accept, honestly. Yeah.
Healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
Also super important. You have this beautiful series, which is titled Shame on Me, and you used Arabic and English in the captions.
Yeah.
One, in listening to what you said, the words you just used, I feel this duality of America, Perth, of brown, whiteness, Was there any kickback or backlash with the intimacy of your work and the combination of Arabic and these images?
Yeah, from my mom. No, it was pretty serious, actually. I shot that series months and months before I released it because I had to really like peer test it with like my community, and because like being a brown woman who owns her sexuality, and I really try and liberate myself through my art specifically, and I find that it was, we were all kind of scared, like my team was scared to release it because of the backlash it might have in the Middle East. And like, I've never, been to Palestine where I'm from, and, I've never been to Saudi and all these places. And I'm like, if this series goes viral, am I going to be allowed in? Like legitimate concerns. And, but everyone we asked a bunch of people, we showed like so many members of our community, and everyone's like, Sarah, this is amazing. You have to release it. And so when I did, it was actually 99.9% positive. And there was like thousands and thousands and thousands of people sharing it, and hundreds of thousands of people engaged in the series. But then it started spreading to like all these like mini accounts on Instagram, and there was so much hate, and it was the very like traditional old world mentality that a woman can't be free. All these people were commenting, calling me a sharmuta, which means slut, and like there was like the devil's child and the woman of the streets, like all these like really derogatory terms in Arabic that are so like offensive. But it was 0.1%. So it really did, it was celebrated and it was widely accepted, which I'm stoked about.
Sarah's work features a lot of visual motifs, recurring symbols and images. Her bathtub makes several appearances throughout her work, as well as an abundance of food.
So when I build my sets, I'm usually romanticizing my reality and trying to expand it to be more indulgent, and as if I could have anything I ever wanted. And so, when you see a lot of my photographs, they're always surrounded by lots and lots of food. And it's because I want to bring in my cultural roots into my work. And, when you come, have you ever been to this is another question for you. Have you ever been to a Arab's household for dinner?
I have. That's the blessing of growing up in Queens.
Yeah. There's a lot of
I was nourished.
So we tend to over prepare, and the women will spend like days in the kitchen, like grounding the meat and like rolling them into vine leaves and creating these really big decadent trays of like some of the best food you'll ever eat in your entire life. And so when these dinners and lunches happen, even breakfast, our breakfast is so beautiful, and there's like a million different plates on the table, but there's no room for your actual plate because there's just so much food everywhere. And so my motif is incorporating that part of my culture into my work, and always celebrating food and indulgence as a way of reimagining my not reimagining, that's not the right word, giving new meaning to my relationship with food, because I did struggle with eating disorders for most of my life. So I think for me, it's so important. Like I've leaned into my art to navigate my trauma and my mental illness and my obsessive thinking. And so, when people see my photographs and they see the dialogue on it, a lot of that comes from me meditating over my pain and trying to find an outlet for it. And so my art has very much been birthed from my trauma and trying to create spaces where I feel safe to release the things that I wish I said, or the things that I actually said, or, the things that I was too afraid to say, Yeah.
Dope. May we all have the courage and patience to sit with our traumas. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Sarah and I are going to dive into her beautiful book, Dear Love. We are back with visual artist Sarah Bahbah. Since photography is Sarah's main medium, I wanted to know where, when, and how her love affair with the camera began. So you're a photographer, one of the many things in your art world. When was it a physical camera? Was it a phone? What was the first, picture?
It was my sister's, she had a DSLR that she used in college, and I would steal it. And I would go to the park and get my cousin to pose for me, and then I would paint photos of her.
Wow.
So it started with a passion for painting and wanting to paint still life and portraits of people that I love. And then I was like, I'm too impatient to paint. I'm going to start taking photos.
Sarah's art is heavily influenced by films and romance. Her images are sensual, but always tell a story. Her art has made an impact, so much so that she was the first Arab to shoot a cover for GQ Middle East. Her work has been featured in countless publications, including the New York Times, Forbes, Vogue, The Hollywood Reporter, just to name a few. So I think you have this signature style. What inspired it? Where did the pictures start to where they are now, and where are they going?
My signature style, so I used to shoot music festivals. That's kind of where I started. And my goal was to capture the warmth and nostalgia of long summer days where you're with your friends and you're in the sun and you're drinking wine and you're dancing and you're just flowing through the day till night. And so a lot of my work, especially coming from Perth, such a sunny city, the focus was on using color to amplify the scene and have it be the thing that allows people to connect based on their connection with what those colors represent. So what does a warm sunny day represent to them? And I would try and mark my photos with that feeling by using color. And over time, I started creating this signature that everyone's like, oh, that's a Sarah Bahbah photo. I know that's hers because of the way it's colored. So that's how my signature started. But then in 2015, I started using subtitles on my photos to express myself. And it was my innermost, vulnerable dialogue poured out onto my photographs. And that was stemmed from my love for Tumblr at the time, and how there were so many screenshots of films that had subtitles on them. And I was like, wow, wouldn't it be cool to create photos instead of film and convince people that the photos came from a movie or something, but it was actually just a photograph with your truth on it.
How do you come up with these ideas?
The playgrounds in my head. I really just close my eyes and dream of, where I want to be and and I build those worlds in my head to escape my reality.
Do you have a favorite photograph of yours?
Of mine?
Yeah.
That I've taken?
Yeah.
There's too many. I actually really love a lot of my photographs. But there's one from my series Ebb, which is the Shame on Me one, or Shame on You. Depends how you're saying it to someone. But I'm lying in a bathtub, and there's a adgile, which is the shisha pipe, and there's kanafe, and there's a keffeya, which is the Palestinian scarf. And I just think that completely embodies my personality. And I'm eating the kanafe from the plate in the bath. And a bathtub is my safe space. It's like a place where I go to like sink in and then release. And I always feel like I have like a little rebirth every time I have a bath, because it's like you're in a womb. And so I think that's my favorite photograph.
I've talked about my personal struggles with identity in regards to representation several times on the show, and Sarah understands that struggle too. Her next project hopes to address this. I think in our conversation it's clear that your identity as a Palestinian Middle Eastern woman has inspired your work. Is that the main source of inspiration, or is it, what are you still looking for? What big questions are you asking?
Yeah. So I guess the questions that I'm trying to ask myself right now. So I have a show in development with a network right now, and they've acquired one of my photo series to create into a TV series. And I have had my outline due for months now, and I finally submitted it. But a lot of the questions I was asking myself is, what is the story I want to tell right now? And what is the story that needs to be told? And, in TV, in all media, in the Western world, I think this is I don't know if people really think about this, but there is 1% representation of Middle Easterns in the television space. We have Rami.
And getting worse.
Yeah, we have Rami, we have Mo, and then, there's barely any Arabs in the writing rooms, barely any Persians. That we're just we're very much not we've not been invited by Hollywood yet, and we haven't been celebrated by Hollywood yet. And I grew up watching TV shows from Australia, which was all white centered, and it was all about the white narrative, and it conditioned me for a really long time. And I've done so much work around my identity and celebrating who I am and the people that I come from. And I just I really wish that we had representation. And the big questions that I've been asking myself is, how do we do that? How can I use, this opportunity that I have with this big network to tell my story as an Arab woman who grew up in a Western world? And so I submitted my outline on Friday, and I literally had to call my exec and be like, so I know you guys acquired this one series, but I'm not focusing on that anymore. I'm that is one part of a bigger story, and I want to give you guys the bigger story because I know shows take years to make, and I want to be fully invested in this, and I don't want to be invested in it if it's not going to be centered around a Palestinian woman. And so, yeah, that's what I've been working on.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
But of course, artists are never just working on one thing at a time. Earlier this year, Sarah released Dear Love, a beautiful book showcasing 600 images across 10 years of her work. For people who don't know your art, where should they begin? The early stuff, the now stuff, all of it?
I think they should begin with my book, because I spent a year putting that together so you could have it all in one place.
Can you tell us about the book?
Yes. It's a decade of my art. So it's photography, it's film, it's poetry, it's writing. It's a lifetime of storytelling. So I dive deep into, my background and my identity and where I come from and my journey to becoming the artist that I am today. And I spent a year working on this every day, 12 to 16 hours a day. I self-published it. I project managed it. I, funded it. I invested it's actually like $500,000 now into this book, to give it to the world, and it means so much to me. And I think it's going to be one of those like slow burns where people like won't realize what they have in their hands until they actually take the time to read it.
I've held it in my hands. It's absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
Also, it's true what you just said. I was expecting pictures, but the story and the intentionality to the story was beautiful, and was all the things you mentioned about being an artist and being authentic and being open and finding your identity. Have you found your identity?
Yeah, I think I have.
Oh, wow. Success. It's possible.
Yeah, it took a lot. It was, I think and I say this in the book as well, but we're born into this world as love. And then, we just build so many layers of these like core beliefs that are fed to us by the people that we surround ourselves with, that we forget who we are. And if we can remove and shed all those layers and go back to love, then you're existing as, the person you are and the person you're supposed to be.
For someone who's not an artist, how do you shed those stories?
If you're not an artist, I think there's an artist in all of us, but it's sitting with yourself and allowing yourself to feel what you're supposed to feel without judgment, and truly just like embodying like this visitor. Emotions are visitors. They come and they go. And if you ignore them, then they get louder and louder and heavier, and they'll come with you wherever you go. And so you have to sit with your emotions and not let them dictate who you are, which is love.
You have this love letter that you wrote in your book, Dear Lover. It's a letter to baby Sarah. You mentioned some emotional things. Was it hard for you to write this letter? When did you write this letter? Yeah. How did it spew out of you?
Well, that whole book, Dear Love, was extremely challenging to create, because I had to relive my trauma every day that I worked on it, because I wanted to be able to use this book as a release to celebrate the things that I've overcome. So I guess that letter was hard, but I had to do it.
Including the letter in the book was such a moving act of vulnerability. And for many, that's what art is all about. For Sarah, being an artist means getting in touch with your authentic self and potentially helping others along the way. What is the role of honesty and transparency in art?
The role of honesty and transparency in art, I think it allows, as an artist, if you can harness your inner, most authentic self in your work and really give people the rawest and most vulnerable parts of yourself, then that, once you release it, that is the power of art. It allows people to access those parts of themselves that they might not be able to without your work.
Thank you, Sarah, for sharing your story with me. If you want to check out Sarah's work or buy her book, Dear Love, go to Sarah Bahbah, that's BAHBAH.com. She plans on going on a book tour, so look out for those dates, and you do not want to miss it. Peace and love, y'all. Many blessings. Brown Enough is a production of Stitcher Studios. It's created and hosted by me, Christopher Rivas, and I'm also an executive producer. Our team includes producer Manolo Morales, technical director Casey Holford, production assistant Gabriella Gladney, and executive producer Camille Stanley. Original music by Casey Holford. Special thanks to Abby Aguilar. Workhouse Media is a contributing producer to this podcast. Carlos E. Hernandez of Ikigai Management is also an executive producer of Brown Enough. Don't forget to subscribe or follow Brown Enough so you never miss an episode. Thanks. Peace and love.